Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's Academy Finance Professionals Power Hour, the first of this new academic year. Welcome. Just quickly run through some housekeeping before we make a start. If you would like to ask a question, please use the chat function to ask any queries, and use the thumbs up if you like the question, to upvote the question so that the team can provide an answer. This session will be recorded and the slides will be shared after the event. You'll notice there's a little barcode down in the bottom right hand corner of this slide. You can scan this with your mobile device, and later on in the presentation, once you've heard the presentation, you'll be able to provide us with some feedback, which we really value. There's also another code a bit further on in the slide that you can use to respond. Today's session will be delivered by Andrew Duncan and Nikki Summers, who will be providing a session on the Academy's Chart of Accounts and automation tool. We'll also hear from India Payne from Price Bailey Auditors to hear an auditor's perspective. Please stay with us after the demo and the Q&A session. There will be some further information on what's coming next month, and another question that our colleagues in HMRC have asked VAT registered academies to provide a response. So I will hand over now. Andrew, if you're ready, I will hand over to you to make a start.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. As said, welcome to the Academy's Chart of Accounts and Automation presentation. Next slide, please. So what we're looking at today is some of the backgrounds, benefits and results so far of automation. What is automation, who can use it and how you can use it. Next steps for you yourself, your trust, and for us, the DFE. And we get in a unique auditor's perspective this time. We've never done that before. And then some further help and information. So a quick poll for you. Do you currently use the DFE's chart of accounts? So this should come up in the chat if you just want to put your answer in there, please. Okay, we'll just let that run and we'll carry on. Next slide, please. Okay, so a brief overview of the Academy's Chart of Accounts and Automation.
Okay, so thanks very much, Andrew. Thanks everybody for attending today. So the main focus of this session is really on the automation of your financial data, but we will be sort of looking at chart of accounts throughout the presentation as well, because it's an integral part of automation. So for any trusts who are new to Academy Chart of Accounts and Automation, just a really quick overview to get us started. So the Academy Chart of Accounts itself is the Academy sector standard for financial reporting, which is basically a standardised list of general ledger account codes. So the Chart of Accounts is currently not mandatory, but we are expecting trusts to adopt it. So, you know, we're making every effort to try and support trusts in doing that as far as we can. The Chart of Accounts does also underpin automation. So you either need to adopt the Chart of Accounts or map to it in order to use that automated functionality. And approximately, as at January 23, 1/3 of trusts had adopted the Chart of Accounts, and we know that that figure is rising quite quickly. So automation itself refers to the instant transfer of data from the trust FMS system into the DFE's financial returns. Currently, that is for the accounts return and also to enable the trust to run a draft financial statements. For the accounts return last year, 28% of the sector had the possibility that they were able to automate their data via their trust FMS suppliers, and we hope that this year that will be as much as 80% of the sector who would have the capability to automate There's obviously lots of other things that have to happen for that to happen. Sort of, you know, adopting the chart of accounts. You actually upgrading your system to be able to use automation. Lots of things, but hopefully that total capability will be 80%. Next slide, please. So moving on to the benefits of chart of accounts and automation. From our perspective, if a academy, a trust has adopted the chart of accounts, firstly, this provides standardisation across trusts and within trusts. So, you know, if both academy trust is using the same chart of accounts, those business processes such as rebrokerage would be improved. And also auditors would be using one COA, so they'd be familiar across trusts with your accounting and be able to better support you and hopefully improve efficiencies there. Also, staff moving across trusts would also be familiar with a single chart of accounts as well. It would also improve the data quality. As you're all using one chart of accounts, that initial coding of your income expenditure, it would be far less subjective, and in turn that improves the insights via your View My Financial Insights and benchmarking. There's also potential to improve financial management. So a lot of the queries that we've had from trusts actually, you know, as a result of having to embed a new chart of accounts, they've also had to sort of improve their business processes as well. There's also the fact that the impact of new DFE reporting requirements are reduced. So, you know, we as a DFE, we can kind of see what's coming down the line, and then we can anticipate that either in our guidance and in time. But yeah, every year when we update the chart of accounts, we can add those new account codes, which the trust can then start using straight away. So that's, you know, it's a really transparent process. And obviously also, as I've already said, using the chart of accounts then enables you to use automation. So with automation, we see that there are then added benefits. You know, you've done the hard work of adopting the chart of accounts, and then, you know, for our mind, that the automation is then is the much easier bit. So that's where you know, the benefits are major time saving in completing your in your accounts return currently. So obviously the input time is greatly reduced because a large percentage of that form is automated. There's a reduction of human error due to the fact that you're no longer manually inputting, and many of the all the hard validations should no longer trigger, because the mapping in the background of the automation tool ensures that that doesn't happen. You will still see your soft validation triggers. We can't do anything to prevent that because that's about the values that you're automating, but those hard validations, you should no longer see those. You can also make use of the just financial statements, which is an extra functionality of within the accounts return. And you would also be able to see your end-to-end audit trail. So for every accounts return field, you will be able to see which balances from your general ledger populate that by running a report. And that's also really useful for your auditor. The DFE gets to see the trust's granular data as well. So we can actually see because you've automated your data, we can see that that data at general ledger account code level. And we really hope that that's going to be useful, because we know there's lots of people that are interested in getting those insights into your spending, so that we can better help areas of pressure and make and push out those efficiencies to trusts for further efficiencies. And you can also take advantage of new developments. So I'm going to come on to that later. But essentially, the more trusts that adopt the Academy's chart of accounts and automate their data, it provides greater benefit for the whole sector. So next slide, please. So just moving on to some feedback about the chart of accounts and automation. So early adopters, it's been a really common theme. Trusts have come back to us and said the actual initial mapping phase was quite difficult. Obviously, you know, every trust is set up a little bit differently. Your existing chart of accounts is different to the Academy's chart of accounts in a few ways. But once that process has been gone through, then actually it's really straightforward and it works really well. And, you know, automation itself, you know, lots of feedback to say how well that's worked and how easy that is. The odd teething problem here and there. So if we can move on to the next slide, please. Thank you. So this graph basically shows at the end of the accounts return every year, we have a post-completion survey. For last year's accounts return, we had 289 respondents. 59 of those had used automation. So the overwhelming feedback of that from the question that we asked, was our automation faster than manual entry, was that yes, it was. I mean, obviously we want to see that score being 100%, but as you'll understand, you know, there's a few teething problems, people using it for the first time, maybe not coding things right first time. So, but absolutely, we really want to make sure that that's pushed towards 100%. We've got a couple of good news stories as well. You know, within that, there was a trust who completed and submitted their accounts return in 1 working day, and also we know somebody that actually purchased some mapping software from their FMS supplier and submitted to their auditors in a single working day last year. So some really good news stories there. So if you could go on to the next slide, please. So some feedback here regarding trust satisfaction around clearing validations. This is a key metric for us, as we know that this is a key frustration for trusts, are those hard validations and trying to sort them out. So for those trusts who use automation, proportionately the feedback of very satisfied was actually much better, much higher for those using automation than it was for those who manually input their data. So moving on to the next slide, please. And again, very similar graph here regarding the overall satisfaction of completing the accounts return. Again, those who used automation showed a much higher very satisfied rating than those who completed using manual input. Next slide, please. So moving on to automation now, focusing on automation. Who can use it and how do you use it? So, you know, we know that, you know, manual input can be really frustrating for the reasons that I've said, you know, human error, hard validations triggering, you know, if you've got lots of academies and all that data input numerous times into the benchmarking tables, etc. So, you know, I'll demo it in a minute, but you'll see that the automated input is literally the push of a button. As long as you've got that data in your general ledger first time, it should be as easy as that, and then a matter of reviewing. Obviously your auditor looking through it, but it should be really quick. I mean, obviously we do realise that school business professionals are never going to be in the position that they can sit back and relax, but hopefully it will take some of the stress out of your day. Next slide, please. So this slide basically shows where the percentage of the accounts return form that can be completed using manual input, automated input, automated data. So the dark blue at the bottom, that shows the value, the percentage of automated fields, which you'll see for the larger the trust, the more academies that a trust has, the greater the percentage of the automated fields that are completed for you. And that's obviously due to the fact that the academy level data, that being the benchmarking and the land and buildings table, are also completed for you when you automate. so the manual percentage at the top, we think that's probably a little bit, whilst this data is based on absolute fields rather than what the trusts have actually completed, we actually think that the manual fields, because they contain a lot of fields that are not so regularly used, like related party transactions, etc., that actually the manual proportion is less and the automated percentage is actually greater. But yeah, you'll see for a 20 school mat that percentage is 80% completed by automation, and then that goes up to a 70 school mat who would have approximately 91% completed using automation. But we will endeavour to get some real information about academy usage on that in the near future. Thank you. Next slide, please.
Thanks, Nikki.
Over to you, Andrew.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so we'll look at the 3 steps to using automation now. And you see the first one there is the trust must have adopted the Academy's chart of accounts. That's via 2 ways. The first way is via native adoption, so that's your own account codes within your own system, or via mapping via the SMS supplier's software. Point 2 there is the trust FMS supplier must have adopted their own functionality to use automation, and the trust software must be upgraded if necessary to use the automation. That's the important part. It's worth checking with your supplier if you need to do that. And the third point there is IDAMS. So that's the system you use to sign on to the financial returns. The trust must have somebody set up as a data transfer approver role on IDAMS. Next slide, please. So which suppliers will be able to automate this year? You see on the left there, we've got 4, Access, Hogue 100, Sage Data and Xero Thorn Widgery. They all successfully automated for 21-22, and that will be the case for 22-23. And on the right-hand side, we also expect these ones to automate, but some of them still have to run tests with us, demos, such as like. So the ones on the left have successfully tested with this already. That's Bromcom, ESS, Sims, ESS FMS6, Sage Ion, and Sage FOSS Solutions Accounting, Sage 200. Their other side, Sage Solutions for Accounting has Sage Intact as well, but they're yet to test with us. And we've got Iris there as well. There's a point there, so ESS are looking for volunteers out there to run through some sending live data for FMS6. So if that's applicable to anyone out there, you are on FMS6 and you want to automate, either put your details in the chat or feel free to contact ESS directly and volunteer for that. Do look out for some partnership demos. We'll be pushing out some comms, and I'm sure your suppliers will as well. We do run regular demos in conjunction with suppliers, and we like to show the whole automation process in one piece. Next slide, please. So this shows all the known FMS suppliers and the progress as of September this year. Again, of the 4 in the middle are the successfully automated. On the left there, we've got expected. Not currently developed on the bottom left is Civica. That just means we haven't got to that point yet where we're comfortable they're expected. Early discussions to 22-23, that's Bluecast, CCH, Aquila, and MS Dynamics. And the ones in red on the right-hand side, I'm not going to read off that long list. If that's applicable to you, you can see that supplier is not currently developing, and no development plan for 22-23. That just means we tried to contact them all, but some did not reply. So if anyone out there does have any contacts for those suppliers on the right-hand side, please do share those with us, and we'll contact them and see if we can get them into the green or the orange for this year. Next slide, please. Nikki, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Andrew. Could somebody confirm that I'm sharing my screen?
Yeah, we can see the data up on
Lovely.
screen.
Thank you very much. So if you have sent your data through from your FMS system to the DFE, you've set up your data as a data transfer approver, you'd have sent the data through. when you go into your accounts return, this is the screen that you will see. If you're actually already in your accounts return, wherever you are, this pending highlighted pending appears at the top to show that you've got some data, a data upload waiting for you to action. So when you get to this screen, you can either apply the data into the form. You can reject it if actually, you know, decide, oh, I forgot to change this balance that an auditor sent through, or you can ignore it. So if you accept that data, it's as simple as just clicking that button. We do have a check screen there, because when you do accept the data, if you've already previously sent an upload, this will overwrite it. So you just have to be really clear that that's what will happen. So if you're a little bit worried about doing that, you can actually download a report and save your previous data. But this is just a double check to show that you're happy. So if we apply this data, hopefully this will work. That will take you into the index table that you're familiar with seeing. In exactly the same way as before, this you would still need to complete your overview section so that the rest of the accounts return does appear. Because we've already sent data into this form before, we've actually gone through the process of completing the overview. So that because this is the second time that we've sent data into this form, then obviously that form is open because you've already completed your overview section. So you will see it's as simple as it's populated all the data from our test data into this form. Wherever that data has been automated, you'll have the automation label on the field, and if you change that data, it will change it to click out the field, it will change it to modified. So there's a really clear audit trail on the data that you've brought into the form automatically from your general ledger, and then where you've changed it. So I'm not going to go into any detail today because we'll save that for later demos, but also just to show you the other additional functionality within the AR form, if you've automated, is the ability to download your FMS mapping report, which shows you, as I said earlier, for every AR field, how that's been populated from your general ledger, and also the draft financial statements template as well. So using exactly the same data that you've applied into your AR, it will also populate this draft financial statements template, which is based on the Cape Town format. Okay, so I'll just go back to the presentation. Okay, if you could have the next slide, please. Lovely. So moving on to next steps then. So for the trusts, we really think that this is a great opportunity for trusts to review their FMS software. Is it fit for purpose? So not just does it use the Academy chart of accounts, but is it doing all those other things? Is it creating all those other efficiencies to make your trust much more efficient in your financial business processes? So yeah, talk to your current FMS provider. Will it allow you to adopt the Academy's chart of accounts, and also really importantly automation as well? So you know, sometimes we know that trusts have kind of moved to the Academy's chart of accounts without really thinking of that next step, about if their FMS supplier is going to also be developing automation or has already. So really important that you check that out. Also talk to your auditor. They're a really important partner in this process. So you know, they may already know trusts who have adopted the chart of accounts and used automation, so we'll be able to give you some tips there. Also talk to them about that initial mapping. You can also come to the DFE as well, but sometimes it's best to talk to your auditor about your specific circumstances as well. and also talk to them about ongoing efficiencies that both of you can make by using the chart of accounts and automation. Also, it's great to talk to your peers. We know that a third of trusts have adopted chart of accounts already, so there's plenty of people out there with experience to help you. Also review the information available on our web pages. We've got loads of stuff out there, and we regularly have workshops, webinars, and update our information. Also, if you're a trust that hasn't even adopted the chart of accounts yet, have a look at the chart of accounts when you're doing your accounts return. If you filter on the accounts return fields, it actually, you know, it'll be able to show you the chart of accounts codes that feed into that, to those, you know, if you're struggling on what goes where, you can maybe align the descriptions in your current COA to the Academy's chart of accounts. I mean, it's certainly not going to be an exact fit for anybody, which is why we're trying to standardise things. But it may well help you or get you familiar with the chart of accounts, with a view to you adopting it at a later date. Next steps, please. Sorry, next slide. Thank you. Okay, so we've had loads and loads of feedback from trusts. We've done lots of webinars, workshops. We're always out there surveying trusts and conferences, etc. So the overwhelming ask, I think, of trusts has been, when are you going to automate the BFR? So for this is our really big incentive to get trusts to use automation for their accounts return 22-23, is that the data that you automate will be used to populate your BFR 24, the actuals columns for 22-23. Next slide, please. Okay, so what this looks like then in reality is, as you can see from the screenshot here, in your BFR, those first three actuals columns, which are your 22-23 data, we will use the data that you've sent through via automation into your 22-23 chart of accounts, and we will populate those three columns. We have done some extensive work, really detailed work on those trusts who automated their data last year, and the ones that they also sent in their BFR quite early as well this year. We were able to look at some really good mapping between those two data sets, because they should have been the same. So we've really tested that. We've made a few tweaks to our mapping. There are a couple of little anomalies around capital, which we will address through guidance, and then updating the chart of accounts for next year. We just need to add another couple of codes to make that work perfectly. But other than that, you know, it looks like we're that should be really helpful for trusts. So, as well as pre-populating those first three columns, we'll also provide an FMS mapping report that we also provide in the AR, so you can see the balances that make up the balances in your general ledger that make up each of those fields. And we're going to also provide you with a pre-populated template as well, so that actually that will really help you to complete the remainder of your BFR form. So you'll be able to see which chart of accounts codes have fed into which BFR fields, and then you should hopefully be able to complete the rest of your the template and then your BFR form based on that. So really hoping that is a big incentive to really help trusts decide that they're going to automate their financial data for the AR 22-23. But yeah, just as an added for all trusts, what we'll also do is for every field, we will add a link in there to identify which chart of accounts codes do feed into that BFR field. So that should be a help for everybody that's using the chart of accounts. So move on to the next slide, please. Okay, so the second thing we're looking at is improving remittance advice notes. Next slide, please. So this idea came from trusts via dial-in sessions. It's a really simple idea, and which we really want to take forward. We've scratched the surface, started to investigate this, and actually it's quite a complex thing to action across the DFE, but we are going to persist. In the interim, we will put out a list of ESFA and DFA grant codes with obviously with a chart of accounts code showing where each one will should be coded to in the Academy's chart of accounts to add to our web page. So hopefully that will be really useful for trusts, and it's also in line with our best practice of making sure trusts are posting things right first time to the correct DFE, to the correct chart of accounts code. Next slide, please. So another thing that we're working on currently is developing a matrix framework for FMS suppliers. So again, this is feedback from trusts saying to us, oh, well, we'd like to change the GFE, but there's so many suppliers out there, we just don't know who's offering what. As Andrew showed earlier, we've got 47 FMS suppliers in the marketplace. Next slide, please. So with that in mind, we've recently sent out a survey to trust on financial management systems, and we had an absolutely fantastic response of 416 respondees replying. So firstly, that's provided us feedback on how we're doing so far. So 87% of respondents have told us that they're either already or they're planning to adopt the chart of accounts. And 42% of respondents said that they were planning to use automation for 22-23, which is also fantastic. Secondly, it's provided us feedback with about the current FMS landscape, and that will help us to tailor our future support. And lastly, it's provided us information to help us define the criteria that we're going to use in our FMS supplier matrix, which when we've refined that further, we'll send that out to to trusts as well to have a look over and get further feedback on that. So if you could see the next slide, please. Thank you. So these are some of the results from the survey around trusts looking for new FMS suppliers. So 121 of the 416 respondents said that they were planning to change FMS supplier. And as you can see from the top right hand screenshot, that most trusts they don't know who they might use. So this matrix we're designing this matrix to really help those trusts who actually it's a bit of a minefield out there, to really help them focus on what system is suitable for them. As you can see from the two screenshots below, we asked trusts on what really matters to them about having a new FMS system, or indeed their current one. So that will help us to define the criteria. No great surprises there. Obviously, cost is a key one, and also integrating with other systems, and that's where trusts are really going to find their efficiencies. Next slide, please. Okay, so also our feedback from auditors from last year's AR has shown us that actually we really need to promote high quality mapping and use of chart of accounts codes, and reducing the number of modified fields in the accounts return, because that's where we really get the efficiencies. Coding it right first time reduces that level of modified fields. Next slide, please. So this is a summary table of last year's for last year's trusts who used automation, and what you'll see is the average modifications for trust level detail was 34. Now, if the data is coded right first time in the your income and expenditure is coded right first time in your general ledger, we should be getting that 34 should really be sort of more like 10 to 12, because we know there are some areas in the form where modifications have to be made because we don't automate to every single field. So there's potential maximum 10 to 12 modifications that we should be made, we think. So that is something for us to really work on, and with trust to get that number down, so that your auditor isn't having to support you on that. You're not having to make changes in your general ledger. So with that in mind, we've started running mapping workshops, which have been really well attended. We'll continue to work with auditors for the AR 22-23 to see what comes out of that, to find out if there are any specific areas which we need to focus on to make sure trusts are coding it right first time, and also provide better information on coding grants. As I'd already said, if we can give you a list on actually for every single grant where you need to code it in the chart of accounts, then hopefully that will really tighten up that coding and reduce those numbers of modified fields. Next slide, please. Okay, so also lastly, to kind of make all those suggestions, feedback, and all those new work streams that we've got, to make that all work, it's really important for us to work with other people. And we are now integrated into the school's resource management programme of improvements, and really getting a lot more contacts across the DFE. And we are also, working as close as we can with auditors as well. So with that, if you could, next slide, please. If we can, we've got India to talk to us about an auditor's perspective and what things you need to think about when you're automating your financial data for your AR 22-23. Thank you.
Thanks, Andrew. Thanks, Nikki. We're thankful for the chance to speak today, just to show another side of the partnership in using automation, an auditor's perspective as such. From our viewpoint, we just wanted to highlight a few of the key areas that we believe are important, but also that will just help the overall efficiency if you do decide to use the automation. Thank you. So got a couple of key points on there, so we'll go through some of them. So for us, the first one is early engagement. If you're thinking of using automation for this year, for the accounts return, that's great, but speak to your auditor. We know academies have different arrangements, so some of them utilise the services of their auditor, and the auditor gets heavily involved in the preparation of the accounts return. But otherwise, some academies like to prepare themselves. Either way, if you are thinking about it, do speak to your auditors early on. Now, as Nikki showed earlier in the live demo, the transfer of data from your finance system to the accounts return online form is actually incredibly simple, but it has to come from your finance system. We won't be able to lead on that first step. So if your auditor does usually fully prepare the accounts return for you, which we know a lot do, then that is a slight change in the process. Now, the key message we always deliver when we're speaking to users and our audit clients, and Nikki's already mentioned, is code it right first time. That for us is really the key message. So just ensuring that you're using the ESFA's chart of accounts to its maximum potential. Academies and all the schools within your trust, if you're a multi-academy trust, just need to ensure that accurately using that chart of accounts, as it really is the key to efficient automation from our experiences. So Nikki mentioned slightly the idea of modifying cells, but if the data gets transferred into the accounts return from your finance system, but actually it turns out some of it might have been in the wrong place, when it's in the accounts return, that needs to be modified. Those modifications take time. The more cells that are modified, the more time lost. So posting to the chart of accounts right first time is essential. And there's various support and guidance across the ESFA and potentially auditors. So anybody thinking of using automation, do utilise all that guidance and support that is available. Next slide, please. Thank you. Now, there's just a couple of points on here that I've noted, but I'm just going to jump straight to a few of the common examples that we have with mapping issues, just to give you an idea. So when we say code it right first time, and where the key efficiencies are, these are the type of things we're looking at. So we see overuse of the other DfE revenue grants code. We still see items like pupil premium posted in here, but pupil premium has its own code. So where you've got codes set up and that are there to be used, please do make sure you use them. A couple of other good examples is fixed assets. We tend to see most editions just posted to editions other, as that's the simplest option. But the accounts return wants the granular detail, the sort of detail that isn't required for the statutory accounts. So that is where the slight difference is. Before, when you've posted to editions other, that's probably fine for the auditors because we take it, we test it, we know where that's going. But when you are doing automation, that needs to be right in your chart of accounts. So for example, if you had your fixed assets, you would need to split your additions accordingly between what was funded by DfE capital grants, what was funded by other grants, and then if applicable, the right elements to go in other. That's a slight change. And there's various changes throughout the chart of accounts. A similar example with your year-end adjustments like deferred income, accrued income. The accounts return wants that granular detail behind it, and we don't necessarily have that in the statutory accounts. So it's purely for the accounts return and for the automation element of it. So if you were doing deferred income, for example, you would need to split between DfE capital grants, other capital grants, DfE revenue grants, other revenue grants, and other. So if you are thinking of using automations, and we had a couple of trusts that did last year, which was great, and it was great to sort of follow that process through, but the majority of the conversations we had was making sure that your chart of accounts has been set up correctly. If it's not, for example, on deferred income, if it all went into deferred income other when it got automated in, we would then have to take that out, modify the cell, and then you then have that slight expectation gap of who makes those adjustments. If your auditor usually prepares your accounts return, then actually you might say, actually, can you go through and make those adjustments, or that might be back with the trust to do. So there is a slight expectation gap that we have seen. So overall, if you are thinking of using automation, and we fully support the drive for more academies to do so, but the key really is coding it right first time, using the chart of accounts to its maximum potential, and utilizing all that support out there, because really up until now academies have never needed to worry about posting that sort of detail in their finance system or the statutory accounts in some cases, but for automation those changes are needed. I hope that gives everybody a little view of what it's like from our perspective. Just a couple of pointers to take away, but to anybody using it, our key message is just code it right first time. Thank you. Next slide.
Thanks, India. Okay, so we can look at some more general help and information. Next slide, please. So you'll see on there, there's our timeline. A couple of things to pull out here is the AR and draft financial statements both went live together this year. That's on the 12th of September, so the Tuesday gone. If you haven't been in yet, please do make an effort to go in and check that your trust details are correct. And if not, raise a request and the team will fix those as soon as possible. The AR deadline this year is extended to the 30th of January. Some good news there, hopefully. Next slide, please. Okay, so you see on screen there's various ways you can get in touch with us if you need any help or further guidance. This will be in the slide pack, so I'm not going to go through all this individually. Next slide, please. Okay, so we are offering some 30-minute one-to-one slots. They're really popular last year, so we're pushing them out again. If you are interested, if you haven't yet automated and you're interested in taking advantage of those, please use that MS Forms link, and we will get in touch with you. We got lots of feedback from these sessions last year and action points for future development, so it really does help if you want to do that. Requests did come back quickly, so first come, first serve. If it's applicable to you, please let us know. And we'll be running some 30-minute automation demo slots from November through to January. That's for trusts and auditors. So if your supplier hasn't yet run a joined up demo with us, those sessions might be useful to yourself. Last slide, please. So following everything you've heard today, this question is for you. Are you now considering using automation for the accounts return 22-23? In the chat, please, as last time. And while that's running, I'll just hand over. Next slide, please. So if you had that chance yet, if you'd like to put some questions in the chat, feel free. If not, I shall hand back.
Thank you very much, all. That was a great session, really, really informative. I know a number of the questions in the chat have been answered and we're just mindful of time, but there was one for India. If we can just come to that one that may not have been answered. Just 1 second.
Is that the one on the reduction of fees for auditors? Yeah,
yes,
it's a common question we get, which is absolutely fine. So I can only really speak for Price Bailey auditors, but the few trusts that we had that automated last year, we found that because they were using the chart of accounts fine, absolutely fine for the audited accounts. There was no problems from an audit perspective from there, but the granular detail of using the split out of the codes, like I used in my example for accrued income, deferred income, wasn't there. So we found that when they transferred their information, we were making a lot of modifications. That takes time, and actually when you put the information in and then you play around with it and change it, we didn't see an increase in efficiency for us at that point because it was the first year that they've used it. We've now worked with that trust and given back our feedback. So actually, hopefully going forward, as the efficiencies come in and if we start to spend less time on helping them prepare the accounts return, then yeah, for us, we would definitely see a reduction in fees because naturally we'd be spending less time on it. But as I said, in our side, the key message is, coding it right first time.
Brilliant. Thanks, India. That's really helpful. Thank you. Yeah, just having a quick look through. I think most of the questions have been answered. Let's just have a look. We've got some new questions coming in. Yeah, we've got someone who's looking, so our academies incurring significant costs from their finance system suppliers to adopt the COA. I don't know if that's one for the team or again, perhaps one for India. I'd like to pick that up, please.
That would be one for us, I think. Yeah, no, we're really aware that this is the case. Whilst we cannot do anything about the charges, what we can do is make it a little bit more transparent, I guess, and that's why we're trying. One of the reasons we're trying to get this FMS matrix together. So whilst obviously some of the pricing structures are a little bit complex, but what we can do is kind of lead trusts to kind of that pricing structure and hopefully get those a little bit more transparent and showing obviously the whole raft of products that are available on the market, all with very, very different pricing structures. So obviously it's not the only criteria that is important. There'll be lots of other things, and often, yeah, the increased cost may go with a system that provides more functionality. So, but obviously, different trusts have got kind of different needs. So we just want to try and get all that information out there in a really clear format, which really helps trusts to make decisions on any kind of future changes that they may want to make, and actually holds the FMS suppliers to to account a little bit as well in being more transparent. So.
Great, thanks, Nikki. Thanks very much. Just another one here. Lots of praise for the codes being within the remittance advices, but one says keeping it simple is a good idea. Reviewing a new code for 23-24 non-teaching. Oops, it's disappeared. Non-teaching leadership costs required careful consideration because there seems to be 3 different definitions of leadership, the annual accounts return, etc.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, we appreciate that, and there's different, unfortunately there's different guidance in the accounts direction to in the accounts return and the benchmarking. It is, but we needed to add those for flexibility because I think how it was set up before, we had got no alternative. I think all leadership costs were going into non-teaching, which isn't always the case. So it really, we did need to improve the flexibility, but unfortunately we can't do anything about the guidance differences, and it is kind of up to trusts really. Yeah, unfortunately it's the big anomaly between the AAD and the AR.
Great.
Unfortunately.
Thank you, Nikki. That's really helpful. John has asked, as you mentioned, the coding on remittance advice is complex. Is there scope for a coding document to be shared in the interim?
Yeah,
for example, a crib sheet.
Absolutely,
yeah.
And that's what I've kind of suggested in the presentation. You know, that's still going to take a bit of time to get together. We're always hearing of we hear from trusts when a new grant has been set up. So as you can imagine, there's whilst we might be able to, we'll be able to get out a list of current grants, it's actually making sure we get information about those new grants when they come on board as well to add to that list. So, you know, we will do our absolute best to get as much out as possible, but it's a bit of a big ship that needs to be turned around there. But yeah, we really think it's something that's worth putting the effort into. So so yeah, we'll definitely get something out as soon as we can on that.
Lovely, thank you. One from Julie, Nikki. Why does the Year 7 catch-up code still exist as no longer payable? Should this not be changed to recovery and tuition payments?
Yeah, really good point. We'll definitely take that away. You know, it's not something that anybody's raised before, and as I said, we're not users of the chart of accounts, so we kind of rely on trust coming to us and telling us things like that. So yeah, we'll definitely take that away and look at it for next year's chart of accounts update. Thank you.
Brilliant. And just time for the final one. Just a thought on the chart of accounts info on gov.uk. It's quite vague, and it's that Pauline belongs to a number of financial forums, and there are many questions about where do I code this, etc. And she's just wondering, is there a way gov.uk can provide more specifics on a central question bank? So would you give more uniformly across all trusts in one area?
Yeah, I mean, we do have, I mean, obviously you need to be a member, but I think half of trusts are members of the FD forum. So we do have a question bank on there that all trusts can see. There's a specific chart of accounts. So if a trust posts something on there, we'll put a reply on and every trust can see that. And we do have a account code guidance. So for every I&E account code, we haven't got anything for balance sheets yet, but for every I&E account code, there is some guidance which we're updating as and when we get queries from trust. So that might be useful. But if I can take your email address, I'd really like to have, you know, if we can have a focus session with you, that would be absolutely fantastic. And any other ideas you've got, we'll discuss that with you, because we do want to review that information. We've got a new member of the team, so you know we're kind of going to task her with kind of a fresh pair of eyes approach. But obviously, yeah, we also really want the feedback from the users as well. So please, yeah, if I can have your email address, if you could put that, if you don't mind putting that in the chat, or just send it to one of the in the help and information page. You've got all our email addresses in there. Just contact us there and we'll get back to you. That's fantastic. Thank you.
I've seen in the chat you mentioned the mapping workshops. We don't have any dates on the website at the moment. We will be releasing some more shortly. But to draw your attention, we do have a Q&A dial-in session on the Wednesday the 20th at 3 o'clock. So please do come along to that if you want some more information or specific advice from us.
Yeah, and actually, if you've got any follow-up questions from this session as well, that's kind of why we put it in quickly for next week. So that actually, yeah, if you've got any follow-up questions from this session, please join us. Again, we find those really, really useful. Sometimes we only get 1 or 2 trusts join, but it doesn't matter. We can have a really decent conversation with them about chart of accounts and all sorts of other things, which really helps us, you know, contextualise your pressures, you know, across the DFE. So that's fantastic. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you so much. Thanks for your time, India and Nikki and Andrew. That was really informative and really helpful. Just moving on to what's coming next. Next month on the 5th of October, we have a session on the Land and Buildings Collection Tool to help you find out how to complete and submit the collection tool to the ESFA. You'll also see there's a QR code there, as I mentioned at the beginning. We value your feedback, so if you've got time to quickly scan that and let us know how helpful you found this session or provide any other suggestions, we would welcome that. We have one final question for you, please. Our colleagues in HMRC who came along last May have asked if we could ask you whether you've seen the article in this week's ESFA update on VAT for VAT registered academies. It's around partial exemption. If you could post in the chat, please, that would be really, really helpful, just to let them have that feedback, and then they will be able to respond to that. Okay, well, thank you very, very much for your time, everyone. And thank you as well again to Nikki, Andrew and India, and for you for joining us today. Many thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.